Let's see if we can get this done. Uh, the topic of the day is borderline personality disorder and the 5 stages that it has. Now, officially, it's not known as a staged or tiered disorder. They're still figuring a lot about the disorder. This is stuff that I've noticed and figured out on my own. Now, I could get into a lot of the technical stuff on the disorder. The symptoms such as the fear of abandonment, the struggle with emotion, risky behavior, suicide ideology, all these things that are at this point reasonably well known about the disorder. But I don't think people that don't suffer from it really understand it because people don't see the world in technical terms. That's a textbook, that's a piece of paper, that is not life to them. So I wanted to try to address this in more of a psychological metaphor, if you will. And the medium of this metaphor is what I term the spark. See, all life has this drive, this natural, innate push forward to grow, to reproduce, to survive, to endure. I believe this spark at the very center, this catalyst for life, is where that originates from, and it's a part of everybody. Now, when it comes to borderline personality disorder, I believe it is during roughly around the middle stage, which I'll get to the stages, that spark goes away. Smothered, it dies, choose your metaphor, you know. Uh, so, to better emphasize how this comes into play, let me just start with the first phase, which I call the pre phase. Now, I call it the pre phase because, at least in my experience, things didn't immediately start off like they became, but it kind of set me up in a way. Because I started off, having friends, get along, popular at school, stuff like that. Nice kid, whatever, always joking. And that was my pre phase. It was before things set in, before life changed. And that change is the second phase. The second phase, also known as the change and the negative catalyst, is in my case where there was an almost entire flip of life. My parents divorced, we moved. My dad's alcoholism became more pronounced, and I became his primary target because I was an easy target. Um, and combine that with the fact we moved to an area that was mostly Mexican, so I was not popular. I was actually an outcast automatically. So I had no friends, nobody in which to confide in, no nothing to bring in other than the pain I was being exposed to. So this has a very dehumanizing effect on a person, and that's something I've noticed is very common during the second phase is the dehumanizing nature of the borderline personality disorder. There it is. I have to charge my tablet, go figure. I had my notes on it and then the battery died. That's awesome timing. So, as I was. So, during this change, this transition, to me, I always saw myself at this point as like just monster, the worst, most horrible thing in the world, just because that is how the world made me feel. I felt completely unwanted, unwelcome, hated just for being, you know. And I believe that feeling, that intense sense of not being wanted, is one of the prime catalysts that lead to the disorder. So the drive is so intense that I believe it causes that spark, that essence of life to abandon the body. Now the body keeps going because that's the nature of the physical form. Uh, and but that part, that quintessential essence of yourself is no longer there. It's like this hole inside that you can't fill. I struggled with severe depression uh, chronically for decades. Uh, suicide ideation, which is a prevalent, pervasive sense of suicide. I just know that everything always hurt, and the only way I was ever going to get away from the pain was to die. There was no healing, there was no outgrowing it, there was no change that could take that pain away because that's all I had. That's all it was anymore. It was pain, the pain I was exposed to. This leads me to the third stage, which I call the storm. This is the point where it's becoming so traumatic that the individual is losing their sense of identity, their sense of self. They're becoming a byproduct of the pain of the second phase, the catalyst. They're becoming an expression of what went wrong instead of an individual into themselves. And I think that's what leads that psychological perspective of like myself, seeing myself as a monster because it was my alcoholic father that was acting like the monster. But I had no sense of self, so I projected his behavior as who I was. Even though I was still nice, I was quiet, didn't hardly deal with anything. That's how I saw myself. I was a projection of how he made me feel because I had no feelings of my own anymore. That was that spark. That's what left. Now, in the loss of that spark, another thing I've noticed is during that part, like during the storm, it causes the person to be very codependent with this extreme fear of abandonment. And I believe that's because they feel that spark dying and they're trying to heal it. They're trying to bring it back. So they're trying to connect to people. And there's at least in my experience, a desperation there. Like a drowning victim trying to get one more breath of air. Reaching, grasping, just wanting somebody to be there. Didn't work in my case. Nobody was there. Whatever. Uh, so I had to find my own ways of dealing with that struggle. But I believe that's also the root of the suicide ideation is a part of them has already died. So they can never really be whole until they die themselves. Nothing can heal, nothing can fill that hole because it's gone. It didn't just disappear, it's just gone. And they can never be whole again until they die and rejoin that part left because life was too painful. So the next phase we have is the healing, the attempt to reconnect and correct the issue. This is where the person is trying to redefine themselves. They're trying to relearn how to connect. Now, they don't have that spark to naturally connect to people like most people do. So it's very, I hesitate to say passive aggressive in the approach, but it's like I know with myself, it was like I was always reaching to, because I wanted somebody to be close, but I would never let them close. There was always this wall blocking everybody away. They had no way to access me because that spark was the bridge that let them in. So I would hold on to them because through them, through that connection, I could feel that spark, and in its own way, I felt whole again. Which is why, with the fear of abandonment, a person with borderline losing that relationship is extremely devastating because they didn't just lose a relationship; they lost themselves again. They're back in that storm, that place they don't want to be. So now this fourth stage it's a very defining one. It's essential the individual has a strong support group, friends, family, people that can help them to relearn how to connect, to help them feel welcome and belonging. And it's very difficult to do that because a person doesn't understand how. You have to teach them like a child in some ways. And in the same way, like an adult can get frustrated with a child that doesn't just pick up its toys, because the nature of a child has different priorities. It doesn't focus on things the same way an adult does. So with borderline, there's a part of them that is in many ways like a child. They don't have that ability to just fix it like everybody thinks they should be able to. You can't fix what's not there. They're trying to synthesize something to serve as that spark, a mechanical heart to keep the blood pumping, you know? And a strong support group is essential in this because alone, you can't build it. You can't build it by yourself. You can't learn to connect by yourself. It doesn't work. You have nothing to connect to. And if that ends up being the case, then you may just enter the fifth phase, which I call the surrendering. That's where you've given up connecting, you've given up feeling, you've accepted the fact that the world is just work and pain, and you're just doing your part. You know, there are people that depend on me, and there are people that care about me. I understand that. But I can't connect to anything. I'm empty, hollow all the time. You know, in some ways, it's worse than depression because it doesn't even hurt me anymore. It's just an echo. And that's what life became after a while. Uh, Now, borderline personality disorder it's a weird disorder in a number of ways. For one, when it comes to the suicide issue, it's shown that the risk of suicide becomes worse as the person gets older instead of less, which is more common with a lot of suicide influence disorders. You know, uh, and a lot of that is because as a person generally gets older, their emotional state generally becomes more stable. As they mature, their brain finishes developing, things tend to balance themselves out better. And like where they say don't give antidepressants to a teenager because they're more likely to commit suicide, that's because at that point in their life, there's a severe imbalance between, their chemical emotional development and their cognitive development, which is the guiding aspect that allows them to keep that check to find that balance. But with borderline, it's not even a matter of balance. It's like having a black hole inside of yourself. And if you never find any way to create some sense of homeostasis, to create your own synthetic bridge to the world, then you're just working, waiting to die. I can't guarantee how long I'll even be in this world. I've spent years learning coping methods, defense mechanisms, psychological techniques. I've designed several of them just to try to find ways of dealing with the pain, the depression, the emptiness, the loneliness, the feelings of just not being wanted, of always being in the way. Something that even people without the disorder, I'm sure, feel a lot and can, at least to a high degree, understand how difficult it is to see yourself as a human when you never can find yourself as one. It's like being in a room full of people, like a vampire. You look in the mirror and you see everybody but yourself. That you're in the room, you're standing there, but you're not there when you look. And that's in many ways what it feels like. Because, like they say, the vampire's reflection can't be seen because he has no soul. I cannot connect. I cannot be a part of the world because I lack that spark to bridge the connection. So anyway, hopefully this helps at least some people understand the disorder a little better. Like I said, this is based on my own personal experience with the disorder and my own understanding of, the biomechanics and chemical processes and all that fun stuff. And I didn't really get into the technical aspect of it because, like I said, people don't see the world in a technical manner. I designed myself to see it in multiple manners, including technical, trying to find that middle ground where things exist. But hopefully the more psychological metaphor approach can better help people understand, the difficulty of having the disorder. But anyway, I'm going to end this video now, so y'all have a good one. Bye.